The first thing we're going to do with this part is we're going to create a facing operation on the workpiece. And so our workpiece is oriented in the machine tool like this. The face of the workpiece, the top of the workpiece, can interact with the bottom of the tool as the tool moves up and down in the z-axis in the spindle. And so what we want to do is we just want to remove this layer of material that comes on the stock material so that we'll have a machined surface to work with for the future operations. So to do this facing operation, it's really pretty simple. We need to select the top face of the workpiece. Now to do that selection, if you go to sub-elements and highlight, make sure both sub-elements and highlight are turned on. If you click here in the center of that face of the workpiece, it asks you, in this case, it's asking me, do I want face 51? It's possible that you'll have a different number right there, but as long as it's highlighted the surface that we're talking about here, you're going to go ahead and left-click and tell it yes. Now, in the instance where you've got sub-elements and highlight turned on, and you click close to the edge here, it's going to ask you, did you want this edge? And I'm going to right-click in that case and say, no, I don't want that edge. Nope, I don't want that edge. I don't want that loop. I don't want that loop. I don't want that loop. And now it's asking, do I want that face? And I can left-click and tell it yes. So if you click right in the center of the face, it's going to work every time. If you click somewhere near some other feature, you're going to have to cycle through to make sure that it's the face that you want. So I've selected that face. I'm going to go to my toolbar, my traditional solid mill production toolbar. And then I'm going to click the facing operation. And so for this facing operation, it will open up. For every operation, there's a few things that you need to have. You need to have a tool selected. You need to tell it which tool you're going to use. With that tool, we've got a feed, speed, depth of cut, and width of cut that's appropriate, and we'll have to put those into the dialog box. The other thing we have to do with every cutting operation, and so in this case, I've got my workpiece, and I've got my face mill. What I've got to do is I've got to tell it, how does the tool go from the tool change location down to the workpiece, and then what does it do as it's just coming in contact with the workpiece? So we've got to tell it, how does it approach the workpiece, and then how does it do the lead-in when it just starts doing that cutting operation. So we've got to tell it, and then of course we've got to tell it what motion pattern do we want it to have as it goes across the workpiece, and how do we want it to interact with the workpiece. So the first thing, we selected the face on the top of the workpiece. We're going to use, from our tool list that came in with our file, we're going to use the 3-inch face mill that we've already defined here for you. Now if you look up on your feed and speed chart that we gave you, you'll see that the appropriate cutting speed for this tool is 5414, and the appropriate feed in both the Z and the X and Y is 0.003 inches per flute, so per tooth. So if you put those things in, if it didn't come up by default for you when you got here, just go ahead and put those in. On the strategy tab, we actually get to tell it, how do we want it to move across the workpiece? And there's a few options. On strategy, we can tell it we want it to climb mill. And that's, it's really a lot more important in a side milling operation or a contouring operation. But what it means is the rotation of the tool and the direction of the flutes will tend to pull the tool into the workpiece. And a conventional milling operation over here would be where the rotation of the tool is tending to push the tool away from the workpiece as you're going. And in this case, we could actually use a zigzag motion for this facing operation. We're going to remove just a little bit of material again. All we want to do is get rid of this as manufactured surface and put a machine surface on it. We're going to use the zigzag pattern. We're not going to use one pass. We would use one pass if the width of the face mill, the diameter of the face mill, was bigger than the width of the workpiece. We can ignore bridge movements and stuff for now. Our step over is actually going to tell us how much of that tool, what's the width of cut that we want to have with this each pass. We're going to go with 30% step over for this part. This tool can actually go anywhere from about 30% to about 70%. What we don't want to have with this tool usually is 50%, because it ends up setting up some vibrations and some chatter in the part. But so we'll go with 30%. Our overhang direction, it can be overhang, so it starts at one end, it goes past the part on the other side. It can be on both sides or it can be on one end. Because of our 30% step over, we can actually go with one-way overhang. If you look at the pictures here, it sort of shows you what you're going to do. Stock allowance on walls, we can ignore this. Stock allowance walls, which is floors, make sure those are 0. The total depth, we want to remove 50 thousandths of material from the top of the workpiece, just enough so that we have a nice flat smooth surface that we've machined, so it's not the as manufactured surface on the workpiece. Okay, so we can just use the default settings down here. Stock automation can be on or off in this case. There's really, unless you're doing a very detailed, complex part, there's really no reason to turn the stock automation off. So we'll leave that on, and it will trim, which means if we've told the part to go the tool to go way beyond the edges of the stock material that we've defined, it will cut that stuff off. This links here is how do we want it to move when it's not cutting the workpiece. And so we'll go with a full clearance of 1 inch, clearance of 0.1 inches. We want our return plane and our retract plane both to be clearance. So if it's rapiding to get from one part to the other, it will rapid just above the workpiece. Entry mode, so the tool, when it enters the part, so when it comes from the tool change to the workpiece, it's going to come down and then over to the workpiece. So we like that. The distance it's going to start off of the workpiece is 1.6 inches. So as it's going to come down, it will rapid to the position where it's 1.6 inches off the workpiece, which is just a little bit more than half of the diameter of our 3-inch tool. It'll come down, it will move across the tool. Let's go ahead and click OK. And so that created us a facing operation. If we simulate, we go in our simulation, press run, and let's stop. Let's slow it down and do that one more time just to see the tool motion pattern here. And so the facing operation itself looks okay, except it left a little material here on this edge. If I go back, go to my facing operation, and strategy, if I say 2-way for my overhang direction, click OK. And so now it seems like it removed all the material off the workpiece, so I like that. What I don't like, if I come to my, let's go to the left view here. If I look at it, my workpiece here, the thing that I wanted to make, is above the surface that we created with our facing operation. And so I'm going to hit the stop there. And so you can see as we've put our workpiece in here, I've got the 0 of the workpiece lined up with the XYZ axis. I've also, if I turn on the stock material, the 0 of the stock material is lined up with the XYZ axis. Now, in the machine tool, you could account for this and you could fix it. But the best thing to do before we do this, if I go ahead and turn off my stock material just so I can see what I'm doing, is to actually select that workpiece. And I want the whole workpiece now, not just the face. So I select the workpiece. I'm going to right click, I'm going to copy, I'm going to translate it, and I want to translate it negative 50 thousandths in the Z direction. So I want to move it down that same depth of our facing operation. And I'll click OK. Oops, I made a copy. Let me undo that. If I right click, copy, translate, tell it to move instead of copy, and OK. And so that now moved it down. If I do my facing operation, we'll see that it removes the material, and now the top of the faced stock material is even with the top of the finished workpiece. We can actually look at that in a comparison mode where it sees the target is green, so that means we've made the material where we wanted it to. Everything that's blue means that we're outside the range of what we wanted to do. So we've made our facing operation, we've shifted our workpiece material down just a little bit to account for that facing operation that we're going to do. So that's the first thing we want to do with this workpiece.